Good morning. We're going to get started now. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Hate has exploded in the wake of President Trump's election to office. There have been far too many racist threats, plotting, and acts of violence. White supremacists are feeling free to lash out at anyone unlike them. A Trump administration has seemingly opened a Pandora's box. Almost every group has been targeted. Jewish people, immigrants, Muslims, LGBT, African American citizens. You see these types of crimes, hate crimes, inflicted incalculably physical and emotional harm toward particular groups of people. President Trump and those like him have been working too hard, sending powerful messages of intolerance and discrimination to a certain segment of our society. They're tearing down the very fabric of a so-called free society. On Monday, New York City resident Timothy Caughman, age 66 years old, a senior citizen, was murdered by 28-year-old white supremacist James Jackson for no reason other than the color of his skin. An 18-inch knife stabbed in the back, made his way to a police station, died at the hospital, a life interrupted. I'm upset. This murder, a murder of an unarmed, unassuming black man by an admitted white supremacist who has detailed to police that the only reason he traveled 200 miles to New York was to kill black people. It has me demanding from the NYPD brass what method has been enlisted to protect blacks from future attacks. I'm concerned about the racial animus, which is helping to give rise to these sentiments. The kind of sentiment which denotes it's okay to commit a violent crime against black people in this nation, something we've lived with for several centuries. I've reviewed the FBI hate crime statistics. I've read the Southern Poverty Law Center's reports. Last year in New York City, according to NYPD's statistics, hate crimes jumped 30%. And now we have a murder, a cold-blooded, calculated murder. The media reporting of the event, like what the Daily News wrote, sought to criminalize the victim and not the perpetrator. Do we not deserve fair coverage? I'm alarmed about the state of New York City, our state, and the state of America. James Jackson and the Charleston shooter and murderer Dylan Roof may seem like abhorrent aberrations, but they're becoming way too normalized. What happened to Mr. Caughman is not isolated. It is reminiscent in this nation's history. A nation which continues to tell us, promote the theme, make America great again. At what cost? A nation of people where seniors in my district shared the pain with me this week, sharing stories buried long ago by pain and anguish, now being rebirthed. Stories of when they grew up. They never felt safe due to groups like the Klan, who crept in the night and murdered black families in this nation. 18 inches stabbed in the back. Jackson has said he came to New York City because it's the #1 media market in the world. Imagine that. He took the life of Mr. Caughman, a black man, merely for the color of his skin and for media attention. Right now, today, we're saying we want you and others who purport hate and commit murder to be prosecuted to the firmest and fullest extent of the law. Yesterday, Jackson was arraigned in Manhattan Criminal Court and held without bail. He was arraigned on second-degree murder and a weapons charge. Second-degree murder charge carries a sentence of 15 to 25 years. He should absolutely, unequivocally be given life. In court, Prosecutor Joan Aluzzi Orban has stated Mr. Caughman's murder was most likely an act of terrorism, and that the charge may be up to first-degree murder. I'm here to tell you, it was likely, it was more than likely an act of terrorism, but a blatant act under Section 802 of the U.S. Patriot Law, which defines domestic terrorism as a person who engages in domestic terrorism if they do an act dangerous to human life that is a violation of the criminal laws of a state of the United States if the act appears to be intended to intimidate or coerce a civilian population. That is the definition of terrorism, and that is exactly what happened. Under the act, Jackson's assets can be seized, his educational records can be disclosed, his tax records obtained and a search warrant can be obtained for his home. We need to know more about him and whether he truly acted alone. I do not believe he did. Jackson told police officers that this was merely a practice run for a racist mass murder spree and was the first of many plotted executions. Those statements are considered terroristic threats and are also punishable by law. The attack was clearly racially motivated. NYPD Assistant Chief Bill Aubrey said on Wednesday, it's well over 10 years he's been harboring these feelings of hate towards male blacks. According to media reports, the police state Jackson is a member of a known hate group, but would not identify the group. The police seem to have a lot of information, and we as citizens of our city and our state and our nation have a right to know who they are. We need to know, and we need to know now. We have a murder due to hate. This is a matter of national security. It is incumbent upon the current national administration to demonstrate in these volatile racial times protection for blacks in our nation. I await President Trump's tweet concerning this issue. This week I've asked what is the message in response for our local law enforcement. I'm demanding a targeted response from the NYPD in response to white supremacist violence against blacks in New York City. I want to know from the chief the ways in which our police department plans to investigate what Jackson has said about not being an isolated incident. Bottom line, how are black men in our city going to be protected? With my fellow council member Jumaane Williams and Brooklyn Borough President Eric Adams, we're requesting that the hate crime charges to be pled out in this case. This was a hate crime from start to finish. Well, I'm sorry. That it not be pled out in this case. This is a hate crime from start to finish. We're also calling out the confessed murderer to also be charged with domestic terrorism and added to the FBI's terrorist watch list. So while he's in jail, his visitors, etc., can be closely monitored. I did speak with the governor's office, who reached out to me this morning, who confirmed for me that the governor has directed the head of the state police, to work with the FBI and the NYPD to investigate this matter and to determine whether or not there is a pattern and determine whether or not the attacker is connected to a group or organization intended to attack black people. None of us should feel unsafe. None of us should be complacent. We are on high alert. We must continue to work together and shut down the forces of evil, which have been awakened and released in our city and nations. As I stand before you today, I say to America, New York City is not your test market for murder, and Timothy Caughman did not die in vain. We'll fight for his justice and safety for all. Thank you. So now we have several speakers from this vast mosaic, what is New York City, to speak about the impact of not only this crime, but the long, sustained, and pervasive acts against people of color in this country. First, I'd like to hear from Councilmember Chin, who has already said that she has to leave. Sorry about that.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I'm just here to support my colleague, and thank you to all the advocates for coming. This is New York City. This kind of hate crime cannot be tolerated, and when attack is on one community, is attack on all of us, and we have to stay strong. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. So as you can see, we have members of City Council and members from across the city who represent, again, the vast mosaic, who are standing up today with black men to say that enough is enough. Next, I'd like to hear from somebody who's been a long-term advocate and who's not a stranger to fighting for justice in the city, Councilmember Jumaane Williams.
I want to thank Councilmember Cornegy and the BLAC for bringing us here today. I was trying to gather myself because I know the media has a way of painting us as angry black men when we speak on this, but we have a right to be angry. I am infuriated. When I read that Daily News article about this, it infuriated. They spoke about the killer and how well he was dressed. They spoke about the awards he received while in the Army. And then they listed Timothy Caughman's criminal record, possible health status, that he was in transitional home, as if that had anything to do with him being targeted for being black. That is what happened. That is not the first, second, third time that has happened. I expect that from the New York Post. They're a rag, they do that. The Daily News occasionally does that.
Tell me how you really feel.
Well, my hope is that they wouldn't, and thank you for pulling it down later. But the fact is, somebody should have been in that newsroom to say that should be done. But there's only 16% of black journalists across the board in journalism. That may be part of the problem. The bigger problem is, it appears that there are different standards depending who has died. 14 black girls are missing in DC. You probably don't even know that.
That's right.
Heard nothing about it.
Nothing.
Do you even know what happened to the Nigerian girls that are missing? I saw CNN talking about the London attack, which they should, God bless those families. I saw an immediate response from the administration and NYPD about what was going to be done to protect New York City. A man came from Maryland to commit a terrorist act connected to a white supremacist terrorist group. He picked a black man from random and killed him on Monday. It's Friday. I heard nothing about what's going to be done to protect black people in this city. That would never happen with any other group in this city. Now, I'm not mad of other groups getting that attention. We demand the same. I'm happy the mayor put out a statement on Wednesday. That was 2 days too late. I'm thankful I spoke to the DA today and they are looking at terrorism charges. I haven't seen it been called terrorism for the most part in the media. I thank the New York Times for finally someone talking about Timothy Caughman like a human being and describing who he was. I haven't heard a peep from PD about what's going to happen to black churches, what's going to happen to black institutions, what's being done to protect black people who are being plucked off the street and killed because they are black. At minimum, there should have been some words describing the case publicly about who this killer was and the connections he may have and what was being done to make sure that everybody was safe. But even that minimum statement was not afforded to us in the black community. And then people ask us why we have to say things like Black Lives Matter. It's because of this shit right here.
Y'all got a censor button, right?
That's why. Black Lives Matter. The only response to Black Lives Matter is yes, it does. Backed up by action. Other than that, say nothing. Lastly, I want to say, I don't believe many of these things are done intentionally. I believe some are. But that's what makes it hurt even more. That it's ingrained in our institutions, from media to government, to treat black lives less than anyone else. You don't even have to intentionally do it. It rolls out by itself. Nobody says anything for 4 or 5 days. Nobody says we have to help this community feel safe. That's even worse than if you intentionally were saying, so then we would at least know where we are. We are demanding the same respect that other groups get in this city. We demand that our lives matter. This matters. When it comes to hate crime, the people who are being killed the most are transgendered black women. And that is the thing I hear the least about. From Muslim to LGBT to black, of course Muslim, Jews, they all should be treated equally. We can't be a progressive New York City and have our institutions doing anything less.
Thank you, Jumaane. So I'd like to take this opportunity to welcome to the podium one of the Muslim groups that we share a lot of this concern with. I'd like to invite Afaf Nasser and Albert Khan from the Council on American Islamic Relations to bring you.
Good morning, and thank you for being here. I wish I could say it's a better morning. I've been sitting here very, very difficult for the past several days. I've been grappling with what words could possibly convey the sympathy that I feel for the families and the communities that are constantly affected by this kind of senseless violence and hatred. Within the Muslim community, we're not strangers to it. We're a diverse community in and of itself. We've seen attacks on our African American brothers and sisters. We've seen attacks on tan brothers and sisters. We've seen attacks on people who are not even Muslim just because they're perceived to be such. And it all stems from words like satanic, evil, hatred derived from ignorance. And as these words kept swirling around in my head, I felt a type of darkness overcoming me. But then I realized that what today is about is the rejection of that darkness. We stand here in solidarity regardless of our faith, regardless of our skin color. We stand here as human beings who understand that a person's skin color, a person's background, is a blessing from our Creator, the one that created each and every single one of us. And this deranged mentality that one is better than the other, that stems out of arrogance and ignorance, has come to a height that has never really been acknowledged and recognized in this country. This is not new. But what is new is this intersectionality of resistance that we are seeing today. I am not an African American, but I will not allow a breath to be left in my body without me fighting for the justice of this victim and every other victim who has fallen to senseless violence and hatred. Whether from the Muslim community or not from the Muslim community, I will do everything within my power to reject the hatred, to be a part of the resistance, and to fight alongside anyone who stands up for justice, the justice that is demanded and deserved by Mr. Caughman and every other victim. And I will be here repeatedly, day in and day out, until we see that justice served. The Council on American Islamic Relations New York chapter wishes to convey our condolences and sympathies to the loved ones of Mr. Caughman, and serve them in any and to the best capacity that we can. We extend to them any advocacy efforts free of charge, and we will stand by our African American brothers and sisters today and every day thereafter. That is my pledge, that is my promise as a human being, as an attorney, as an advocate, and as a person created by the divine, just as all my other brothers and sisters standing here are. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
A man boarded a bus to bring bigotry to our city. Armed with the hate in his heart and the sword in his hand, he killed Timothy Caughman. This was not just murder. This was not just a hate crime. This was terrorism. But New Yorkers have long shown that we will never be terrified into submission. This terrorist targeted our city in the hopes of gaining attention, and we must not reward him. At the very moment that we gather here to remember the life of Timothy Caughman, to remember this attack on our city, we must commit to forget the name of the monster who stole his life from him. We must pledge to forget it. This terrorist sought fame through his crimes, and we must let that name die off. Timothy Caughman was born and raised in New York. He was a native of Queens. He was a graduate of Brooklyn College. He spent much of his life fighting poverty as a division leader for the neighborhood youth corps. And in the final moments of a life spent helping others, he asked a simple question to the man who was attacking him. Why are you doing this? And today we still don't know much of the answer. Was this murderer a lone wolf terrorist? And if so, how was he self-radicalized into his deadly beliefs? Is this attacker linked to the growing number of white supremacist hate groups that we see targeting communities all across this country? Most importantly, we don't know the answer to this question. What is the NYPD going to do about it? What steps will they take to monitor white supremacist terrorist groups going forward? We know less than 5% of the NYPD Intelligence Division activity is targeted at white supremacists. Yeah. Less than 5%. That cannot continue. These groups are a threat to all New Yorkers. And our NYPD must commit to allocate the resources needed to safeguard communities of color against the white supremacist threat. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I want to thank you for also giving a very humanistic look at who Mr. Caughman was, because that's not being done. So I hope the media catches that and gets the full scope of that life and its importance to our community as a whole. I am proud to be in a body that together represents the mosaic, and when called upon does stand together with strength and with solidarity against these heinous acts. So I have my brother from the Jewish Caucus, David Greenfield, to bring us some remarks.
Thank you, Councilmember Corney. Thank you to all my colleagues and all the advocates who are here today. The problem that we have today in New York City is a very real problem, and that is that we have an epidemic of hate. These are the statistics that are coming from the NYPD. And the shocking statistic, as Councilmember Williams pointed out, is that people are not talking about this issue enough. Anti-black crimes in New York City are up 400% year to date. Anti-Muslim crimes are up 300%. Anti-Jewish crimes are up 272%. Anti-gay crimes are up 30%. And if you're not speaking about the issue, and if our leaders are not talking about the issue, if they're not responding to the issue, then that in itself is the problem. You know, I was thinking today actually on the drive up here, for me, I don't actually normally come in to City Hall on Fridays. It's the day that I spend in the district because of the Jewish Sabbath. And I was thinking of what I was going to say. And it's difficult, as we can see from this morning, to try to articulate the anger and the frustration of when you see and hear of a despicable, horrific, racist, terroristic attack, and you don't see the response, and you don't hear the response that you know should be forthcoming. And so the only thing I could actually think of, especially because it is the eve of the Sabbath, is, and perhaps this is what at least I'm trying to say here today, is that there's a verse in Deuteronomy in the Bible that talks about, it's a little bit strange when you think about it, it actually talks about in a city where there's a dead man that's found in the city. And the leaders of the city need to then come out and they need to publicly proclaim and say, our hands are not responsible for the death of this dead man. It's a very strange portion of the Bible. There's a dead man in the city. Certainly the leaders of the city did not go out and kill that dead man, right? We know that. Leaders are not actively killing the dead man. And in fact, it was something that really bothered the biblical experts for 1,000 years, until along came one of the great experts. His name was Rashi, and he lived 1,000 years ago, and what he said was very interesting and I think very appropriate today. He said, certainly the Bible is not saying that those leaders killed that man. That is certainly not the case. What the Bible is saying is that those leaders need to say that there's nothing that we could have done to have prevented the murder of that man. And that is the question that we are asking here today. The question that we are asking is, was there anything that could have been done to prevent the racist, terrorist murder of a black man simply because of the color of his skin? Was there anything that could have been done to prevent a racist from getting on a bus and traveling hundreds of miles to kill a black man in New York City? And most importantly, and this is the question that we're asking, is what will be done by the leaders to make sure that this never happens again?
Thank you, David. So right now I'm going to bring somebody to the podium who is absolutely no stranger to advocating on behalf of people of color, especially black folks, whose name is actually synonymous with the struggle and the fight for economic parity, for educational parity in the city of New York. And I'm proud to have that person serve in this body with me, Inez Barron.
Thank you. Good morning. Glad that you're here to cover this critical, urgent issue. I want to thank all of my colleagues who are here and those who are not here, but who sent representatives to be able to say that they support this issue. First, I want to extend my condolences to the loved ones of Mr. Caughman and say that we extend to you our heartfelt condolences and that we believe that there is much more to be done. I stand in solidarity with those statements that have been made and the emotions that have been shown here as to the seriousness of this issue. And in response to this issue, I want to bring forth two characteristics: climate and consequences. Right. Climate and consequences. When you realize that this nation was founded on the horrific, inhuman system of chattel slavery, and that no reparations have been issued in regard to those conditions, and that all of the institutions that exist here have that racist component embedded in them. And when you stand and realize that when black people are murdered, there are no consequences, yes, we're going to continue to have the situations addressed as we have seen in the past. We're calling for a change in the climate by saying we've got to change those practices that are embedded, that are racist. And we've got to make sure that there are appropriate consequences when we are victimized, when people are victimized and we are shown videotape, and when we have witnesses who come forward and attest to what has happened, and they would have us not believe our eyes and ears and say that justice is done when people are not brought to trial or when appropriate charges are not leveled against those who have committed the crime. We've got to make changes in the climate, and we've got to now begin, because we have not seen appropriate consequences, begin to make sure that the appropriate consequences are rendered. And in that regard, I invite you to come to a press conference on Monday when we are calling on the Brooklyn DA to institute proceedings against Inspector Shell, who killed Ortanzo Bovell in 2008 and was never prosecuted, was never indicted. We've got to change the climate, and we've got to make sure that appropriate consequences are brought forth for those who continue to abuse us and murder us. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Barron. So when I stand here and I think about the term used, which is this was a heinous act, it actually diminishes the significance of what transpired, because an act makes it singular. This is actually a culmination. As with everything, if something goes unchecked, it will escalate. So the idea that these atrocities have taken place in this country for so long, above and beyond reproach, we now have outright, blatant racism. So the undercurrent of racism that has existed in this country, that has gone virtually unchecked for so long, is now become so viral and so vehement that you have people now saying publicly that I hate black people, and then escalating it to the point that my hate could result in a murder. So those of you who would say that this was one singular act, or who would say that this was a lone wolf, or who would say that it doesn't rise to the level of a terrorist crime, I disagree. What we saw in the South with Dylan Roof, who went into a church during prayer service and executed human beings while they were praying, there is an escalation of hate that we haven't even scratched the surface for. And if we let this go unchecked, I shudder to think where we end up next week. So I'm calling on the NYPD and law enforcement in general to get this in check and to make punishment so severe that those people who would even contemplate this in their networks around this country would think twice and three times about that. What I know about this young man is he's aware that if he's penalized in the system as it stands, he'll go upstate New York, where some of the most racist practices exist, where the most viral racist and bigotry exists, is in upstate New York, not in the South. So there is a belief in his networks that he'll be protected. So he turned himself in almost callously, understanding that the system of justice is not for everyone, and that he would be dealt with differently. We have to change that narrative today, and I'm asking for that narrative to be changed. Another one of the partners in this work is from the Muslim Community Network, who we've called on and who we've walked with and who we've marched with and who we've fought with over issues that are germane to the Muslim community and to the African American community. In representation, we have Christina Tasker from the Muslim Community Network.
Thank you so much, Councilmember. Thank you so much for inviting me and having me here today. It is an honor and privilege. Once again, my name is Christina Tasker. I am the Executive Director of the Muslim Community Network. I am also a strategic advisor to Muslim ARC, which is the Muslim Anti-Racism Collaborative. I'd like to first express my deepest and most sincere condolences to the family and loved ones of Mr. Caughman. When I personally am confronted with unimaginable tragedy, the first thing that I turn to is my faith. God says in the Quran, if anyone were to take a life, unless it be for murder or spreading corruption in the land, it is if he has killed all of mankind. But if anyone were to save a life, it is if he were to save all of mankind. Allah also says, O you who believe, stand out firmly for justice, as witnesses to God, for God is well acquainted with all that you do. In trying to understand this tragedy, for each one of us standing here, I think a little piece of us has died inside. For our brother, Timothy, we know that we come together to stand for justice for him. In 2009, the FBI released a report stating that there's a growing resurgence of white nationalist extremist groups capitalizing on returning vets to exploit their skills and knowledge and further their violent agenda. The report concluded that lone wolves and small terrorist cells embracing violent right-wing extremist ideology are the most dangerous domestic terrorism threat in the United States today. That was in 2009. We know that this is not an isolated incident, as the council member was just saying. This is a rising tide of hatred, of white nationalism and white extremism that is being normalized by leadership in our national government. But we stand here today as people of faith, as people of conscience, as people of moral courage, as people who deeply feel the humanity. And we stand together, we rise together for justice. And we know that we are the light, and that when we rise together, the light always overcomes darkness. And we are shining brightly today. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So, in most circles, we get an opportunity to save the best for last. The brother that I'm gonna bring to the podium now represents the Bronx, but has been a strong voice for the city of New York as it relates to advocating for black men. He's responsible for the resurgence and reinvestigation of the 3/5 clause in the Constitution. I am proud to call him my brother. I'm proud to serve in this government body with someone who would take on federal issues and make them local. They say all politics is local, and who would spend time and effort and energy to make sure that we revisit the origins of some of the racism that exists today. So I'd like to bring forward Brother Andy King.
I want to keep it simple. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank the BLAC and all of us from our Muslim brothers and sisters who are here today. I'm gonna just keep it direct and straight, because we're here because another black man was killed. The history of America, as I've always said, we forget that America was built on a racial divide between white and black. Everyone else picked a number. But the reality is that I'm glad that Brother Cornegy mentioned the 3/5 clause conversation that has been regenerated and we were able to pass here in the council, calling on Congress to amend the United States Constitution, saying that the black in America is whole. Now, for those of you who don't know, I was recently doing some more research as we continue this campaign to get Washington to do the right thing. And while I was reading, every document that I was reading said when the 13th Amendment was implemented, then they stopped enforcing the 3/5 clause. They never said it was not existing and was not in effect. They just said they stopped enforcing it. So it is no different than the law that you have in transit that you cannot put your purse or bag on a seat on an MTA train without getting a summons. But police don't enforce it, but it's still in effect. So if you want to know why no one's come out, whether it's the mayor or the police department or any other person of Caucasian persuasion to really denounce this, is because you still haven't come grapple that we're not equal to you as a human being on this planet. That's the real cause that Emmett Till is not here today, or Medgar Evers, or Dr. King, or Eric Garner. It's because it's not us killing us and getting away with it, is who? You can answer that question. That's the real conversation we did. And while we offer for sensitivity and training and kumbaya moments, I ask us all in New York, see, we get it confused because we live in New York where we fight to get along. But go back to Alabama. Go back to the back roads of Georgia. Hell, you got some parts of Long Island. Hell, go right down the street of Wall Street and see how we get treated. That's real conversation that we don't want to have in America, and that's why we keep having these press conferences and people keep getting killed and we keep begging and we keep pleading. But we keep calling on the system who keeps hurting us to change. There's something wrong with that. When you go to the devil and say, devil, can you please help me, stop hurting me? That's the devil's job to hurt us. So I'm saying to each and every one of us, in order for us to change the way blacks get treated in this country, you gotta change the rules of how they treat people in this country. So for this young man who thought it was okay to take a sword and stick at somebody in the back, if you want to kill somebody, then you need to die too. You don't need to go to jail for 25 years, get fed 3 meals, they say 3 cots in a pot. You don't need that. Because we're paying for you to live when you took the life of a family member of somebody. So I'm asking us all, and I'm thanking every news outlet that's here to report this conversation that we're having today. Because then again, if you value the lives, and I'm calling out the media because we need the media to tell the real story. There should be more cameras here. Should be more media to be able to tell the story of what us elected officials feel that we came together today to have this conversation. And our elected officials who are in a position to make a difference, if they can't figure out how to make a difference, they don't need to be elected officials for the city of New York. That's just real talk. That's from the mayor on down.
Well,
for everybody who has not came out and denounced it, has a media, because you've heard it time and time again. Let this be a little white guy from Park Slope that got killed and see how many people been jumping up and down. But again, here we go again, another black man got killed. Oh, it's the norm. So I'm saying that must stop today. And that must stop with the people who can hold people accountable. And if you're in a position to hold people accountable and make sure that this gentleman doesn't go to jail for 25 years, hey, I have no problems with an eye for an eye. We can't apply Bible and scripture when it works for us and then ignore it when it doesn't work for us. So I want to thank Brother Corney for bringing us out today to having this conversation. As hard as it might be for some of our brothers of Caucasian persuasion to understand, you have a responsibility. If you want us to have kumbaya moments, then you have to hold the people accountable for killing people who are not doing the wrong thing. You got to not only just stand with us, but your mouth got to speak and your actions got to demonstrate. That's all we're asking for. But then again, I'm asking you, and I hope I'm not asking the right people to help me who don't want to help you. If you want to help, be a part of the conversation. But if you don't want to be part of the conversation, sit on the side, but don't get in the way of progress. I want to thank you, Gifford, and I want to thank everybody who came out today. And I say for the young man who committed this killing, your life should end as well. Thank you.
So this is the part when I would like to thank the Black Latino and Asian Caucus, who has stood firm on issues that are germane to those respective communities, but who have served admirably in the city of New York. Today is a day that for me, these are emotional moments. As a black man, this is not just me holding a press conference. This is a conversation that I have over my dinner table at night with my children. So this is an ongoing process. So I don't get to go home tonight and recount this as a press conference. This is real life for me, and these are conversations that I continually have to explain to my children how the lives of black Americans are devalued. So while I'm simultaneously telling my children that they could absolutely be anything in the world, I have to have a side conversation with how you need to be safe and how you need to be protected from those who you should be looking to help you along your path. That's a very difficult conversation to have, and I'm up late at night thinking of ways that I can impart wisdom in them so that they can be successful without embedding in them the long-term and deep-seated hatred that so many black Americans feel that have been betrayed by their country. So this is an opportunity for us as elected officials and law enforcement to stand up and send a resounding message that unlike a time past, there are recourses and repercussions if you act out in this way in a subversive group. There are recourses for Americans who are being slaughtered based on their religion, based on their color, based on their sexual orientation. This is an escalation like I've never actually experienced before. There was a time in this country where people literally and figuratively wore sheets to mask themselves from the atrocities that they perpetrated on people. No more sheets. Now people are making demonstrative statements about their hatred for blacks and carrying out that statement by committing heinous acts. So my question is, where do we go from here? What would we like to do as a country? Would we like to see the giant chasm that's existing now continue to widen in this country? Or will we take this opportunity to step forward and close the gap of hatred that exists? I asked that question to my leaders on city, state, and federal government. This is your opportunity. This is an opportunity for all of us to realize a switch and a swing in the pendulum towards justice for all. Thank you. Oh, so this is, any questions?
The only question,
I can't hear you.
The only question, my condolences, is at the beginning of the press conference, and I'm not defending President Trump, but what happened with Dylan and a lot of these attacks happened before him, and can you kind of address making it partisan or bipartisan?
No, so for me, what we've witnessed is an escalation based on the politics that is in the present day. So yes, listen, racism has existed past, 15 administrations. That's inherent and ingrained in this country. That's right. So we don't say that doesn't exist. However, you can either begin to address it in a way that exposes it and gives us an opportunity as a country to deal with it, or you can fan the flames of deep-seated racism. And I think to some degree what the current administration has done has been very divisive in its rhetoric and has actually emboldened those people who had currently been in the shadows, who during the time period wouldn't think of stepping forward in the way that this person stepped forward on Monday.
I just want to say, agree. The answer is yes. But the environment he's created now is absolutely escalated. Not just Trump, but the people who are supporting him. Republicans are giving him so much power. People like Dan Donovan, who might have been thinking this way for a long time, who couldn't indict a ham sandwich apparently, and now we get a record of Pantaleo, who had a substantiated history. Dan said he couldn't even indict him, so now we know who he is. And people like him, who may not have expressed his views in the past, feel free to support Donald Trump. So it's not just Trump, it's the entire system that's there has allowed this to escalate in a way that we've been saying has been in the undercurrent. And everybody said we were exaggerating, everybody act like we're the problem, and now we see the consequences.
So Make America Great for black people has always been a dog whistle to white supremacists and people who would seek to turn the clock back on these very acts. So we had conversations again at the kitchen table and in the basement about what making America great again symbolized. It didn't symbolize a great America with economic greatness for everyone. It symbolized a time when white supremacists ruled the land. And that's what we're evidence. So that dog whistle has to be put out. The silent dog whistle that goes out through the sentiment of make America great again to activate, and I'm gonna use the language of terrorists, to activate these cells, because that's what's happened. That's what's transpired. The activation of cells that already existed. You said that they were here before Trump got here, but what he did through his rhetoric was to activate.
Yeah, KKK and Nazis supporting this brother. They have said
outwardly.
They have said
this is our president.
He is showing us that our ideas are not out of the mainstream as people think.
Just to clarify, the KKK was originally a Democratic party with George Wallace, and it goes beyond
Democrats are a problem too, but right now,
Say that again?
Democrats are a problem too, 100%. But right now, that's primarily not what's happening. It is Republicans, conservatives, all those people who are acting like those policies weren't racist, weren't xenophobic, or weren't misogynist, and we were saying that they were. That's what's happening. So you can talk about 100, 200 years ago, whatever it was, but the KKK and their newspaper endorsed Donald Trump.
I just want to ask you, so what are we specifically upset about the NYPD for how they hit?
So what we'd like to see as a black community, any agenda that deals directly with the protection from terrorists and white supremacist acts of black people. So we'd like to know, is there a database that's kept for subversive groups like white supremacist groups? We know that there's a database that's kept for suspected and active gang members in the city of New York. We know that. We know that there's an active registry for all of these other groups, for terrorist organizations who've identified themselves by either acts they've committed or by language that they've used. We know that those groups exist. We want to know, is there a watch list or a database kept for those groups that would do harm to black people and Jews and other people?
What I would have liked to see, since this happened on Monday, it is Friday. NYPD, law enforcement, administration, someone should have spoken publicly about what happened, what they learned, and what they're doing to protect black people in this community. When this happens in other communities, that is an automatic response. When the London terrorist attack happened, they automatically came out and said what is being done, before we even knew anyone got it.
With all due respect, the city council is currently guarded by armed, militarized police right now, based on the response to the London attack.
We couldn't even get someone to say, this man came up from here, killed someone from a terrorist cell, as we can call it. This is what we're doing to make sure that black people are protected, black institutions, black churches. You could have widened it to say this is what we're doing to protect everybody and add black folks in there. I mean, there's something. We got nothing. It's Friday.
And in addition to what my colleagues have said, when the jury that made the decision in Bovell's death, where the now inspector of the 7-5, Inspector Shell, when that jury decision said, listen, we see evidence in this civil suit that shows that the ballistics support the facts that this officer fired his gun straight on not from a falling position. And that's why we are awarding the Bovell family $2.5 million. The NYPD said we are not even looking to institute a departmental investigation, which never occurred. So when we see that the NYPD, which has a history of protecting officers who kill people, such as in the Ramali Graham case, and are reluctant to do that, we said we're going to at least require you to report on those instances as they have been demonstrated by terrorist groups.
Have you been in contact with the DA? Now they're the ones who are in charge of prosecution, and NYPD is going to be the guidance and all the questions.
So we've had a coordinated effort on outreach as a team and as a BLAC, and Councilmember Williams has been. I've been in contact with the police commissioner, but he's been in contact with the district attorney.
I was happy what I heard from the DA's office this morning. As you mentioned in open court, what is being charged with now may not be what he's eventually charged with. They are looking into it as, I think, second-degree murder, possibly as a hate crime. They also mentioned that I think they use the word probably, could be an act of terrorism. We believe that it is an act of terrorism, so I'll be following them very closely to see if we get there, and there should be a very good explanation if we don't, because it seems that everything lines up. There is a white supremacist group that he's a part of. There is a network. He came here to inflict murder. He had a plan. It seems to follow all the definitions of what terrorism is, and we want to make sure that there isn't more coming.
So yeah, he made statements to the effect that this was the beginning or a test run or something to that nature. So we are very concerned with what happens this weekend, what happens next week, and how we deal with this. And so it's the opportunity for the NYPD and its brass to show a very strong force on deterring anyone else from coming to the great city of New York to perpetrate this type of a crime. So thank you all for coming.